and he took my parents into the room and said, it might be a mutated gene. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm an X-Men, because X-Men have powers.
After 31 years of not knowing what it was, when I got the diagnosis, because they were just not ready to, even agree that let's check if there is something.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go! Welcome to Inside Out with Soumya. Today, I have two guest speakers who live with rare health conditions, which has and does continue to play a central role in their lives. We're here today to talk about their life experience of living with these rare conditions. We'll be covering three broad aspects in this conversations, including their personal journey of diagnosis and treatment, their emotional and psychological impact, and the way to build resources and support. And for that, the first speaker I have today is Alma, who is an ataxia fighter. She is a disability awareness activist too, a life coach and a motivational speaker. And I just realized also a yoga enthusiast. Had to slide that in. Her mission is to create a society where all individuals have equal access to their rights and opportunities, fostering inclusivity, empowerment, especially for the differently challenged. So thank you and welcome, Alma, for coming here today. And also introducing the second guest speaker, Madhumita, who is a counseling psychologist with 11 plus years of experience, more than a decade. She specializes in counseling for chronic and rare diseases, both for patients and caregivers. She's also worked with various national and internationally reputed organizations. She's currently working with several organizations, including Cloud9 Hospitals in Bangalore and the Organization for Rare Disease, India. So welcome both of you. How are you doing this evening?
Doing well. Summer is about to begin, so bringing in the summer with a very exciting conversation. Thanks, Soumya, for having us here today.
Thank you so much, Soumya, for having me today. As Alma mentioned, that summers have started, but it just feels like May, June in Bangalore. So it's just too difficult to manage. But yeah, I'm doing good and looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you and Alma today on rare disease.
Likewise. So let's dive right into it. And because we're talking about rare health conditions, assuming that not a lot of people know, for anyone who already knows, kudos to you. But for the viewers who might not know, how about we just dive in and explain the conditions that you both have?
Sure. Okay. So I'm Alma. I was diagnosed with cerebellar ataxia. Ataxia is not really a disease in itself. Ataxia is usually a symptom of an overlying disease or a trauma. So when you have spinal cord injury, you have ataxia. When you have multiple sclerosis, you have symptoms of ataxia. When you have muscular dystrophy, you have ataxia. When you have Parkinson's, you have ataxia. So ataxia is more, they say you have ataxic symptoms, you have ataxic gait. So ataxia is more like an adjective rather than a noun. However, as a disease, ataxia is most well known for being genetic, and in the genetic family, the most commonly known form of ataxia is Friedreich's. That's still very uncommon. Less than 2% of the world's population have that form of genetic ataxia. I am lucky enough to have spinocerebellar ataxia, which is very rare because there's no prognosis, meaning in my case, we don't, when I was diagnosed, doctors didn't know what treatment to give me, how I would end up. And there's no etiology, meaning there's no one knew where it came from. High fevers, some kind of injury. I didn't have any underlying problem or genetic issue, so we didn't know, where I guess my condition was gonna leave me. So that's generally about ataxia. It's still very kind of an anomaly. It's becoming a little more popular as awareness builds, really throughout the world. But I would say 10 years ago, no one even knew how to spell ataxia. Now, if you go in hospitals, at least doctors know what ataxia is. So it's a little bit reassuring.
Yeah, I am already hearing some similarities with Madhumita's story as I've heard of it, but I'll of course invite Madhumita to speak about yours also. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree with Alma. 10 years back, nobody knew what is a rare disease. And just to give a brief about what a rare disease is. So a rare disease is a condition where uh, you have a limited number of people per lakh of birth. Okay. And that makes it so difficult that you don't have many patients, you don't have many people suffering from one particular condition. So research, treatment, knowing, finding a medicine, all of that becomes very difficult. And since all these research in itself is difficult, so there's no cure which can come out so easily. So Scimitar syndrome is basically a condition which involves both your heart and lung. Okay. So typically, whenever I say somebody that I have a condition which involves my heart, uh, the comment that I get is, okay, is it a hole in the heart? But no, it's not a hole in the heart. It could be one of the symptoms of Scimitar syndrome. So it's basically a syndrome, which means there are multiple things which are happening not exactly how it should happen in your body, right? So to very briefly tell what Scimitar syndrome is, it's basically a condition where the main artery which supplies blood to the lung, mostly the right lung, that's non-functional. So your blood doesn't reach the right lung in the usual way it should, right? As a result, the body creates another artery. And it could be from anywhere from your heart chambers, anywhere from the other major, arteries in the body. Okay. So that supplies the blood to the lung. And then after this lung purifies the blood again, the blood doesn't reach back to the heart in the usual place it should. Okay. So it reaches somewhere else. So in my case, I don't have a pulmonary artery which supplies the lung with the blood. So my right lung is collapsed. It's very small, uh, and only probably one lobe of the lung was working until 2 years back. And after the lung purified, the blood used to go and mix with the deoxygenated blood, which is being, collected from your entire lower body and reaches the heart. So it gets mixed up. The oxygenated blood gets mixed up with the deoxygenated blood, creating a loop which was of no use. And it was constantly putting a pressure on my heart, on my lungs. Uh, and this is just one part of the problem. So there are people with Scimitar syndrome, they could experience different kinds of problems, different organs being involved in it. Even if it is heart, there are different, issues that could come up with. You could have, a hole in the heart, or uh, a shunting that is happening wherein the blood supply is not proper. So every person with the condition is different. And
Got it.
it, so you can just understand, how difficult it is also for the medical, providers, healthcare providers, even understand what your body is going through and what exactly do you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for giving me and everyone else a brief of the condition that you both live with. And I'm wondering, so like Madhu, you were sharing how there were early indicators of something that's supposed to happen in certain ways not happening, right? Because
Mm.
with both of your conditions, I'm assuming that it's not something like diabetes that you run a test and you find out what's up and down. Yeah, it's very hard to actually get to know what exactly is going on. So tell me more about what was happening or being observed differently with you that helped you, your family to get some help and understand the condition more, or even go to a place where you can get a diagnosis of what's happening.
Right. So, I mean, to start with, as I was saying, that, it started so many years back where a simple, a couple of bouts of cough and cold led to, me spitting up blood and then my parents rushing to the hospital. So, when they went back to the hospital the second time, so that's when the doctor started running the test, right?
Mhm.
So, they did an X-ray and that showed that my right lung is collapsed and it's not working. Okay. And while they were also checking me with the stethoscope, they found they could not find the heartbeat in the left side of my chest. Okay. And they were like,
Okay.
okay. And in a 3-month-old baby, it's very difficult to find out what is the left, what is the right. Right. So they eventually found that the heartbeat was more prominent towards the right. And when they did the X-ray, so they found that I have dextrocardia as well. So they thought that it was dextrocardia again. So there were a lot of confusions
Which
around
is what?
what it is. So dextrocardia is when your heart is shifted to the right side, when your heart is
Mm.
located to the right side. Now, again, there could be many variations. Scimitar syndrome can come up with dextrocardia. So dextrocardia is a sign of it as well. But later on, like much later, I would say, it was finally understood that it's not that my heart is completely located to the right. But because I have a very small right lung, so that empty space, that is something which is taken up by the heart. So my heart is shifted to the right
Mhm.
side. Okay. And
Wow.
uh,
And all
so
of this is testing is going on a few months young
young
baby.
baby, yes.
Uh-huh.
So years passed. I was constantly on treatment for the right lung hyperplasia. So what would
Yeah.
happen is I would frequently get cough and cold, very high fever, uh, to an extent like every month probably I would be down with fever of 104, 105 degrees for 15, 20 days.
104, 105?
Yeah, yeah. So for 15, 20 days in a month, and that has been there throughout my childhood until I was in my teenage. So
Mm.
slowly the fever came down, bouts of fever came down, but cough and cold had continued like for
Cough and
as long as I can remember. Uh, it was only in 2019 when I finally got my diagnosis of Scimitar syndrome. So
mm.
spent these many years of my life without knowing that I have Scimitar syndrome, but just a part of it was known.
Yeah,
So,
just a part of it. And you smile today and you say that, but I can really only imagine what it must be like to pass all of those years struggling, not knowing what the hell is happening.
I mean,
Mhm.
I would say, Soumya, that this thing started in 2018 when I started really feeling this because until that point, I knew that this is the only thing that I have, right?
Hmm.
I had no clue of the actual complete
Yeah,
picture of the condition. And it
yeah.
really came down as a shock after 31 years that, okay, I just knew part of
31
this,
years.
yeah, part
Hmm.
of this, but there's a lot of it actually to the entire condition which we weren't aware of.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to probe more into that. And before that, I also want to ask Alma, what has your experience been growing up What symptoms did you and your loved ones notice around you that pushed you to seek a diagnosis or just go to doctors?
Well, my diagnosis journey was a little bit different. I didn't have any problems at birth or in early childhood. I was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. So I was a very robust athlete, including a gymnast.
Till
And
11 years, you say? 11
I
years.
was diagnosed at 11.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, 10 I was diagnosed. And like I was a gymnast when I was growing up until the age of 8 or 9 or even 10. And I remember it was like, I think my diagnosis didn't even start with me feeling anything. Yeah, I had some aches and headaches as a childhood and high fevers, which may have been a symptom or a sign of that something was wrong. But I think at age 7 or 8, we started noticing that I was standing. I was like, it's like, you know, when you go to a rave and people use their phones,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, I used to sway like that, you know, very subtly though. But mind you, during this time, I was a gymnast, and such a gymnast that I was practicing with the girls from the US Junior Olympic team. And then juxtapose that with being diagnosed with a condition that is very opposite to who you are innately, right? So I used to do cartwheels off of the balance beam, which is like 3 feet off the ground. And I
Wow.
remember after being diagnosed, I went into the gymnasium and I tried doing a somersault, which was like a left-hand thing for gymnast off of like the balance beam that was 1 inch off the ground. And I was having trouble landing just a somersault in like, you know, in a straight line. So it was kind of, my condition came on, I think it was more psychological because it was like, you know, one day you're a full-fledged gymnast, 2 days later you're diagnosed, 4 days later you come back to the gym and you're totally like, you can't operate anything in the gymnasium. So I
Yeah.
think it was kind of psychological, you know, that all of a sudden I wasn't able to do any balancing kind of activities within the gym. But I was very positive and I was in extreme denial when I was diagnosed.
And
I
you were also just 10 years young, so
Yeah, I know. I remember when my neurologist, my main neurologist, he spoke to my parents after like they were talking about the possibilities. Like we gave him my whole genetic tree and ruled out that I was genetic. And he took my parents into the room and said, it might be a mutated gene. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm an X-Men, you know, because X-Men have powers. So
that just speaks about the creative power of kids.
yeah, it definitely does. And I think coming to the diagnosis with that kind of psychology, with even though it was denial, that kind of positivity put me in the place where I am today, where I can say I've overcome so many hurdles within Ataxia that so many people can't, because that positivity was kind of hammered in at such an early age.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds so wonderful. And so it sounds like the journey of your diagnosis was pretty quick and smooth. Like your parents who observed that you would sway a little, and
It
then
was definitely my parents, more my mom.
Mhm.
And it's funny because At that time, of course, I don't have any major recollection of this, so it's mostly what my mom remembers. But she's like, as soon as I started seeing you sway, I switched your pediatrician. And as soon as we switched your pediatrician, the new pediatrician said, go get her checked with an MRI. That's when, it's funny because all those years I had it, but psychologically, this may interest you, and you have it. It's like you have it, then until you're told you have it, you don't really feel it, right? So it's like a placebo effect, kind of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually really interesting if you think
It's
about it.
so interesting that within 2 days, just getting that diagnosis, knowing what the condition is, and you couldn't do that somersault. Your body
Right,
didn't
right. It was
allow
like it
yourself
happened
to.
like overnight, it was like, okay, we have this, now you're totally, I don't want to say this, but you're like totally inebriated, right? You're totally incapacitated. So I had to switch gears pretty quickly. Like I told you, a very robust athlete. I played forward, defense, and soccer. I played softball. I played baseball. I played basketball. I played pretty much all the U.S. sports. And then all of a sudden, saying that, okay, she's not gonna be fit to do these things. So she should find another hobby, another pastime. So I
Even though you
remember,
were doing all of those things, someone told you you wouldn't be able to, and then that
yeah,
realization.
so I was diagnosed, but until the age of 15, I continued all these activities because it was so like inbuilt in me that, without running, without playing soccer, what does a child or teenager do? So until I think the age of like 14-ish, I pretty much pushed myself to continue, doing the sprints in soccer and like trying to hit the ball and I played catch with my father. I remember, just to keep myself believe in myself that, hey, I can do it, nothing is really wrong with me. Then there came a time when I stopped being able to have enough coordination to do any running. So I was pulled out of physical education, which is like in the US, we're given 1 hour of like physical activities and like playing, outdoors or something like that. So that's until age 14 or 15, I pushed myself until, I guess until the glass was totally full and, totally stopped me and said, you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I can so relate to that, Alma.
Hmm.
I mean, been through that myself, not exactly in sports, but a lot of my hobbies, which I had to eventually stop doing because the body just doesn't permit you doing
Yeah.
it,
What are
right?
some
And
of
it's
those hobbies, Madhu?
love dancing. So I
Mhm.
started dance. I mean, I used to dance, as I said, that being sick it was pretty since early childhood itself. So even then, like we are a Bengali family, right? So, you know, dance, singing, these are some things which is just a part and
Yeah.
parcel of everyday life. Uh, so most often, like there would be programs happening, even at home, like some celebrations happening. So at that point of time, they would make me do like dance sitting and dancing. But eventually, I picked up dancing when I was in fifth or sixth grade, and I was a full-fledged dancer, though I didn't learn dancing officially, but used to do stage shows, programs in schools, even in the locality, we would have a lot of
Mhm.
programs. Like every month, there would be programs that I'm dancing, 4, 5 dances at a stretch. But right when I entered my master's, so slowly my, you know, breathing issues started becoming more evident, and there was a point when I couldn't even get up off my bed and go to the next room, right? And that's when I had to drop and stop that, like kind of forever. So yeah, it's same with singing. So yeah, because it puts a
Yeah.
lot of pressure on the vocal cord, and it
Mhm.
becomes very difficult to continue
Yeah.
for some time.
I am hearing both of your stories, and this is the first time I'm hearing about it so in depth. So, and the only word that keeps coming for me is loss. So
Yeah.
much loss in so many different ways, not just as an adult, but as a young child. I mean, as adults, probably we have more resources, cognitive understanding. But what do you do when you're hit with this huge tornado at a young age? So what comes up for you as you think about what's been lost for you growing up or even as adults?
I think it's definitely harder to be hit with something like this in childhood rather than adulthood for the reasons that you just mentioned. I would say for me, it was devastating. After the initial, I think it was, positivity, I took it with positivity, but then in your teenagers, that's when it hit me, that's when I started crying and I started feeling the isolation and I started hearing the, bullying remarks, and I started feeling, okay, why am I different? I am different, what's wrong with me? I think that's, because I think that's when you start thinking your teenage years, that's when you start developing more of your cognitive abilities, and that's the hardest year, because that's when everyone looks to your similarities rather than your differences. So for me, it was very devastating when I was diagnosed, and not being able to put myself into the activities in which I was grown up with, namely my athletic abilities. The hobby that I took up, which turned out to be kind of a lifesaver for me, very cathartic, and was poetry. So it kind of fueled itself, because I started writing poetry to talk to someone, let out my feelings, and it turned out to be really good. And people said, write more, so then I just, it just kind of fueled itself, and it took me all through college. Mostly I wrote about my feelings and, how I overcame stuff. And I mean, I think I was published. Given awards, I was published. I started writing in Spanish, but unfortunately after college, it kind of all melted away. And kind of, was substituted with a more professional life.
Wow, poetry. I would definitely push you a little to read one out for us sometime whenever you're comfortable.
Yeah, but I think going back to your initial observation, loss, I think that is a very apt observation. And I think anyone with a rare disease or some kind of disability or condition is faced with a lot of loss. It's interesting because I just did a session with someone, and they said, like, you lost so much, how does someone at such a young age deal with like the hurdles that you are challenged with when you don't even have the maturity to understand what really the challenge is? And my response was, at such a young age, I was forced to have that maturity, which only is now coming, in handy, because I was forced to become so much more mature than so many of my counterparts at such a young age, that right now I'm ahead of the game, I can say I'm more mature than them. No, just kidding. I think 20 years, my family and I have been running behind cures. Oh, my thought process was always like, okay, let me just do therapy. Let me just focus on improving my balance. Once I'm better, I can have a family. Once I'm better, I can have a career. But I think about 10 years ago, I realized that's not gonna happen. This is my life, whether I improve, and which I'm not saying I don't do therapy. I spend almost 6 hours a day trying to improve my condition. So I'm not saying that I've stopped looking for my improvement, but my thought has changed a little bit, saying that now I'm gonna live after I'm cured.
Mm,
I'm like hell with it. I'm gonna live now, whether or not I have, I have a disability,
yeah.
and now I'm at a place where I can say, oh, okay, let me help the other people who don't have my positivity. Maybe I can help them with a better outlook in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Madhu, you also share that in commonality because you work with so many individuals who have rare disease. And yet, what parts of this word loss resonates with you in your life story?
I mean, this is something which is true in everyday life of ours, I would say, right? I have seen and experienced that myself. I have seen it in the clients who I handle who suffer from rare conditions. So this is a constant. And the saddest part of it, I would say that it's not just one loss, right? Every time it's changing and you
Mhm.
have to constantly cope up with that, right? So for myself, if I have to say, since childhood, you know, some of the major areas that I've lost and I feel losing for them is childhood in itself,
Mm,
right?
Yeah, I
And
agree with you.
like you're just dealing with so much that you you mentally become mature, as Alma said. You have to. You don't have an
you have
option,
to, wow.
right? And as we also commonly say in therapy, that a child who has lost being a child, right? How traumatizing it can be
Mhm.
emotionally for them.
Yes.
And it's just too much. Like I remember that it was very difficult to play with other kids of my age, right?
Mhm.
Nobody would understand what I'm going through. Uh,
Mm,
their parents wouldn't understand what I'm going through. And, being having a condition which is as rare as like 2 to 3 people in 1 lakh people, no layman can have an idea about what that condition is, right?
Mhm.
The child is frequently falling sick. That is all that they see. So
mhm.
as a result, the parents' reaction is also that, okay, let my child not go too close to that child who's not well because my child will fall sick, right? So willingly or unwillingly, you're just isolated from your peer groups. You can't attend to school. You can't. I have never played a sport in my life. Never, literally.
Wow.
Okay, no running at any point of time
Do
because
you desire to when you watch?
I wanted to.
Mm,
I did want to, but it just didn't happen, right?
mhm.
So when I started dancing, that was a time when I was really happy because I could do things with my peers. I could enjoy doing
Wow.
things with my peers, right? When that went off, it was a huge hit.
Mm,
And it was very difficult to cope up with that. Probably I still grieve on that. And, maybe the form of thing that I practice right now is not exactly done, but I did improvise it over the years and do something that just helps me vent
mm,
out and, make me happy.
yeah.
Uh, may not be for a stage show, but I am happy doing that, right?
Yeah. What's that, if you don't mind sharing?
So, interestingly, one of my physiotherapists, he told me that, Manavita, and he happened to be my colleague as well. So we worked together and these conversations used to happen a lot. So he told me that, Madhu, you know, It's okay if you're not being able to do it for, let's say, 10 minutes at a stretch. Maybe not at a, you know, not at a stage. But if you want to do something, and if you notice that, okay, after doing it for 5 minutes, you are getting breathless. You know your body more than anybody else do. Even
Mhm.
your doctors do, right? So when you feel that, okay, this is something which is getting beyond what I can manage, stop at that. But why stop the entire activity? Okay. So
Yeah.
this, and that really stuck with me. Somewhere you have to find out, you know, how do you even, how do you continue some things which gives you happiness? But that is a major loss, right?
It
And
is a major
let her
loss.
pushed herself for 5 more years, right? It becomes very difficult to let go of those parts of you. But sometimes you need to. I have myself had to let go a lot of it. Sometimes find a way, something around it which helps you in continuing it in whatever way is possible.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I sense that heaviness in your voice as you're saying this. I mean,
Right?
it's when does it get easy? I don't know. And these are such existential questions also. Like you say, sometimes we have to let go, but what does it mean to let go
Mm.
when you've already had to let go so much when you didn't want to?
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Am
I
I?
think, Soumya, I think just to extrapolate a little bit to get beyond myself and Madhu here is with Madhu and myself and countless others of us is that it was snatched from us, right? But I think everyone goes
That's so
through that.
different to let go
Mm.
and to have something snatched from you.
But see,
You didn't have a choice in that.
we didn't have a choice, but also see, there's two sides of every coin, right? We're discussing the pain, the loss, the grievances, how hard it was. From other side, the amount of resilience Madhu and I have,
Oh,
and
for
the
sure.
amount of
Yeah.
resilience we're not, we don't even, it's not even a question of whether we have to, it's just thrown at us, just like things are snatched from us, we're also given the trait of resilience.
And we won't overlook that at all. And I'm reminded of this thing how when we talk about trauma, it's a lot of pain, there's a lot of struggle, and there also lies the seed of authenticity, resilience, so much in there. And they go hand in hand. We can't just talk about the pain and just talk about the rainbows of life. They're all going together. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up because I am wondering. So I also have one more question of when you did get diagnosed with your respective conditions, how did the behavior or approach of your family and the immediate loved ones change towards you, if by any chance? And why I'm asking that question is a few of my clients who live with certain conditions and have been diagnosed since childhood, the two things that they talk about are one, how they have to do so much more just to reach a state of normalcy, right? Just to get
Yes,
that.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
Zoom sent some confetti over me automatically. Yeah. So just to reach that stage of okayness, which is so normal to do in day-to-day life, lot more effort goes into it. And second, they say either people don't know, but even when they know, the way they approach them, how they talk to them, that might change. Like I've heard parents being overprotective, which again took so much away, right? So what has your experience been with that? I hope you found this conversation valuable. Continue listening to part 2.